Kelly,
Yes.
I'm so happy that you've got time and energy and the willingness to share with us your perspective on story listening.
Sure.
So, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to host Kelly, an actress, director, and above all, or at the same level, a global diversity and inclusion expert. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And as you see, we are going to talk about story listening.
Sure.
So, actually, the best idea would be just to,
Just go for it.
exactly,
Sure.
just to listen to you from my side.
Sure. So, several years ago, I've been doing storytelling in some form in the global diversity and inclusion field since about 2002. And during that time, it was so much about me telling my story to connect with other people. And what was great was that people did connect. Whether I understood why they were connecting or not was not my importance. It wasn't about me really anymore. And as people have taken to storytelling over the years, and it's really becoming something that many organizations are looking at, how different people tell story and the power of story or use the power of story. What I felt was missing was the impact on, or taking the time to recognize the impact on people when they hear someone else's story, and stop and say it's really important for us to be able to truly hear what people say, and through the listening to somebody's story begin to transform.
So, why storytelling now?
Right. So I think that storytelling is incredibly important because I truly believe that when we begin to experience one another's stories, we begin to recognize the fullness of the person who is in front of us. If we only take them in terms of our stereotypes or our limited information that we have about people, then we begin to make people one dimensional and not the full three-dimensional, four-dimensional, six-dimensional,
With
individual,
all the senses.
all of the
Yeah,
everythings,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so we begin to see them as we see ourselves when we begin to truly pay attention to somebody's story, right? And I truly believe that the way that we dive deeper into someone's story is to truly engage, listen, open up ourselves fully, and engage in this process called story listening trance. And in that trance, some things begin to fall away. My story becomes so embedded into your story. You begin to tell me what's happened in your life, and I can see the people, I can smell the things, I can hear the sounds, and feel the emotions of your story. And when that happens, then I see myself in you. And when I can see myself in you, I am reminded of the oneness of humanity. And the reason why I felt like story listening is so present, or it needs to be something that we are paying very particular attention to, what happens when it happens, is the transformative nature of what that means when I can begin to see myself in you. It changes me. It changes the way that I see the world. It changes how I am willing to experience the world. It changes my ability and willingness to hear how life has been different for you than it has been for me, so that I don't believe that my story is the only story, right? And so when I think about where we are right now in society, because none of our stories exist in a vacuum. All of our stories exist in a way that is in relationship to and alongside our cultural story, our cultural narrative, or our societal narrative. And so, one of my favorite tools to use to be able to unpack that and to explore that is a tool from Leanne Bell, which is called Storytelling for Social Justice. And I think it is an amazing tool and a model to use, not just to unpack the social injustices, but just about any story that you want to think of that impacts or affects a group of people, right? So it is a model that is for organizations, societies, structures, etc. So when I think about this global perspective, or not perspective, this global shift towards this polarized notion of us versus them, if the shortest distance between two strangers is a story, and I truly believe it is, then I believe that we have to understand the story of that other, if you will. And so when you think about the way that things are polarized, what creates that polarity, right? It is this notion of us versus them, and us is better than them, right? Or us is different from them, so keep the different away from us, yeah? And so when we begin to unpack this model that Leanne Bell created, which talks about what is that main and dominant story that we tell that everybody believes. In every culture, there's going to be that dominant story. In every culture, there is going to be that perspective. Right now, that dominant story has been, for the last maybe 20 years in most cultures and countries, about the value of diversity, right? Let's celebrate that value of diversity. What we didn't realize when we were celebrating that diversity is that there were a number of people within our cultures and communities and societies that didn't feel like they saw themselves in that diversity. And so they had stories that they wanted to tell. That, for Leanne Bell, is called the next story stage, which is concealed stories. So what are those stories that exist alongside the dominant, and they come from the margins, right? And when that groundswell has really gotten a lot of attention of people saying, I'm sick of just talking to myself, and other people who feel like I do, I want to do something about it, then we move into these stories of resistance. Worldwide, we have had people from the margins talking about diversity doesn't include me. We need to go back to one people, one nation, one culture. So we're stuck on borders. In every culture almost that exists in the world right now, we're worried about our borders. Here they come, whoever the they is. So those stories of resistance are pushing against the narrative that diversity is good, right? And so the counter narrative is when that resistance movement builds up so much steam that it becomes a different way of being.
Yeah.
We're recognizing that as well. In some of our countries now, we have leaders who are extremists in their views and are very xenophobic and afraid of the so-called other. And now, after we spend a lot of time, or a little, hopefully, knock wood, in the counter story, it then becomes the stock story all over again. And then we will have people who don't see themselves in this new model. The folks that value diversity again become the concealed story and the story from the margin. So I love that tool because I truly think it begins to unpack why it is that we need to stop and listen, so that these pendulum swings that move so extremely far to the right or to the left don't continue to happen, and we take steps forward and take steps back and still don't recognize the oneness of humanity.
Yeah. You have just hit the point with diversity, which was kind of hype word, an in word, an it word. And everybody was focusing on diversity so much that there were hardly any people focusing on, let's say, the inclusion part you have just addressed, and also offering the space for the people that the inclusion is possible. So it's like inviting people, hosting people. And when you invite someone, you invite this person to be your guest.
Yes, that's right.
So story listening is a present, as you keep
Absolutely.
saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You give not only your time, your energy, because it's very intense listening is very energy consuming.
Absolutely.
And then you simply create the space. And with your background in the theater, when I first met you, it was in Berlin. And this conference back then was extremely intensive for me because it was my very first really big international conference.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't remember much.
Yeah.
What I remember was you saying, you know what, after watching the Avatar, I had this Wow, moment. What was the moment?
I see you. I see you. It still gives me chills. It still gives me chills. There is this, there is a, I don't want to say it wrong. I believe that it is a Zulu word called saubana, which really means I see you. And the greeting, it's because it's a greeting. The response greeting is Yebo saubana, we see you. Not, and when I say we see you, I'm not saying that we, as Kelly, me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
I'm saying me, myself, the ancestors, we see you.
Yeah.
And so it is something that connects us in a real deep and powerful way. That's, I'm not just saying, hey, how are you doing, and keep walking, but I see you, and I see that you are a human in the fullness of yourself. So how do I have to be in order for you to be free,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And that statement is something that comes out of the Global Oneness Project around story as well. And it really is deeply embedded in this notion of being seen. And when somebody truly listens to your story and you can tell that they are with you on your journey, you feel so completely whole, like you can breathe and validated and seen. And so it means the world to me. And still to this day, when people know that they want to kind of get me, they'll be like, I see you. And I just break down crying. Thank you.
So it's
Yeah.
the first moment actually when you see someone that you are open to listen to. So actually listening is not only about, using your ears.
Yeah.
It's about exactly this what you have just
Yeah.
described with all the consequences. We know right now in neuroscience that we inherit emotions. So that's why ancestors,
Yes. That's right.
it's not only Kelly, it's not only Joanna.
No.
From your point of view, story listening, what else does it include? I hear you, I see you. What is the core moment?
I am you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.